This movie is a continuation of the syncing sound and looping, although that's erroneous, it's actually repeating sound. So we've got our sound already on the timeline, and I've got 8 seconds worth with a fade out really at second 7. And I wanted to start to synchronize the visuals to go along with this. So I've just grabbed these little hearts out of the library. You've probably seen those in the some other exercises. And I'm going to use the Align tool to help me set this up a little bit. So I've got these 5 hearts on the stage, and what I want to do is start them in the center, and then I want them to go with the beat. So I'm going to grab all 5 of the hearts here, and using the Align, with the Align to Stage turned on, I'm just going to hit center, center, and that's going to stack them all up on top of each other. Also, of course, per usual, I need to distribute these to the layers. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute to layers, and they're all hearts right now. So all my layers say heart. If I wanted to, I could go in and say heart 1, heart 2, heart 3, etc., but I'm going to leave it alone for the moment. Okay, so I've got all my hearts stacked up. In fact, they all look like they're the same thing. I'm going to highlight them all, and you can see that I've got them on my timeline, and I'm going to right click so that I can put a tween on them. And some of these I'm going to do are going to be quite fast, and it's fun to start to build up more and more layers. So I want to put my music back to stream so that I can scrub over a little bit and hear when things are hitting, although I can also see there's like a, let's get back to the beginning here, it's like a, so maybe I want them to just jump in and out. So let's say right there on that big jump, I'm going to have it jump to the corners. So right at this point, I want to take my hearts, and I'm going to take the top one. I'm just going to roughly drag it, and it does let me see that I've got the corners pretty easy. And I'm doing this at the time that I see in my waveform that this is going to hit right at that time. And there's not a lot of frames, so this is just jumping there. So maybe I want them to slowly come back in and then jump out again at that. I decided I would just go ahead and throw something together and then share that with you and show you how, most importantly, show you how the layers were put together to create that. So let me go ahead and set that up for you. Let's move these menus out of the way. You can just watch my little masterpiece, and then we can show you the layers here. So here goes nothing. Okay, so that's one run through of the total 8 seconds with the fade at 7. And so let's take a look at how this was built. First, let me turn off the sound too, though, because my other recording I had the streaming sound on the whole time, and it was quite annoying. So looking at this, you can see that I have folders, and you can create folders right here and put bunches of layers inside of them. So I have a whole folder full of hearts, and you'll also see that it's a sequence of, it's a pattern. So I've got the heart, thumps, goes out to the 5 corners, thumps again, and then they come back immediately to center. So what I did was I copied those frames, and then I pasted them a second time, and the second time I used the color effects. I added a rectangle behind and gave it a tint, and I also took my hearts and gave them a tint so that it's the same stuff, but it looks quite different. And then you'll notice that when it got to about the halfway point, because of the music, I added these sort of series of rings. Let's take a look at what those look like. If we can do the whole thing here. A little tricky real estate trying to get the recording and show you the layers. So the rings are a sequence of layers, 1, 2, 3, the same type of thing where the ring comes out, there's the second one, there's the third one, and they get larger and larger at a little bit different speed so that they catch up with each other. but by the end of the phrase, they're off screen. And then that gets repeated again with a new color palette, and then I swapped, remember the swap? I swapped out the heart for the stars. You could swap it for anything. Don't want the olive, but so I give it a new color palette, new element, did the same thing with the rings, but this time, in addition to the hearts and the rings, I've added these squares that sync up with the clapping, kind of syncopated clapping. So when you just look at that phrase, it's got the circle, the little squares coming in at a syncopated. And then I repeated that again with the squares and the rings, only I went back to the hearts and, of course, did a new color palette and gave all of these little squares a color effect so that it went more into the color palette look of this last color. So because each phrase was 30 frames long, it was pretty easy to just sort of combination of look at the beat and know that, you know, it was going to be roughly 7 frames per beat in the bar, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, of course, working at 30 frames, 15 frames a second is a pretty low frame rate. I couldn't get it exact. If I'd had a higher frame rate, I could have gotten it right on exactly on the beat. 30 is obviously not divisible by 4. Anyway, gab, gabba, gabba. I wanted to point out too that this piece that I put together real quickly is symmetrical because I also wanted to show you how you could play around with the alignment tool, but it's really not necessary that you do something symmetrical. Obviously, this kind of fit with the music, the sort of symmetrical beat going on, but music is, while it's also rhythmic, it can be very much more atmospheric or amorphous, and by all means, you know, use the motion as well as the images that fit with your music. So I hope you have fun with this. Get your music in there, have it repeat, and then try to hook up the visuals so that they sync in time with your music.